And it had snowed and it was muddy, so I hit that dead furrow with my left foot, right between my leg and my knee, or foot and the knee. And I landed on my back, and coming down, I could see the people coming out of this little town yelling and screaming, you know. So I laid on my back, and just like that, they were on top of me. Two Hitler Youth guys, they took off my chute and they stood me up, and a guy in a green uniform came, and he started beating me with his rifle butt. And of course, I had extra clothing on because they told us it's going to be 36 below zero up there. So I put an extra pair of pants on. And so he really didn't do any, but he was pounding away with me with his rifle. A guy in a blue uniform came and pulled him off. And the two started arguing. And they got louder and louder. And all of a sudden, the guy in the blue uniform, he took his fist and he hit the guy in the face. And he knocked him down in the mud too. And he's out there just jumping and hollering. And this guy came over to me. He says, "I'm from the Luftwaffe." "You're okay now," he said. So these two Hitler Youth kids, they marched me through the town, and all the people are on the sidelines just yelling and screaming at me. I don't know what they're saying. So, and these little Hitler Youth kids were in uniform. So they took me into an office, a building, and there was a desk with a German behind it, and there was a huge picture of Hitler. Huge. It must have been 6 feet by 5 feet, a huge thing. And these kids, they marched me in front of this little, German officer, and all of a sudden they stood at attention, they clicked their boots, and Heil Hitler. Oh my. Now Don Gilmer, when he graduated from high school, he took a bicycle trip to Germany, and he talked to the Boy Scouts out in Quinn's Woods. We had a meeting, and he told his story about Germany. He says about this thing about saluting and saying Heil Hitler. He says when you when you meet somebody, you don't shake their hand first. It's Heil Hitler first, then you shake their hand. Okay. I says, talk about dumb. Nobody would do that. But boy, I sure learned in a hurry. So none of it could speak German, so they searched me and I took all this stuff, and the Catholic women in St. Peter's Church, they'd sent me a package, and they'd sent me a little prayer book, and they also sent me a rosary, and I put that rosary in these pants that I wore had pockets on the side of your pants on the legs, and I had it in there. And one of them pulled it up, and he raised it up, and he went on, and everybody laughed. I didn't know what he said, but I suppose he thought this was going to save him from the great Germany, huh? Well, then they took us to an airfield near Hanover, and there they put me into as a jail, and there was a bunk with one little blanket, and that was it. I was there about a half hour, then it hit me. I found out that to really be scared, fear, you have to think about it a while. All that night I didn't sleep, cold, and I could hear engines being started, airplane engines, and airplanes taking off. And so the next morning they brought me in a piece of bread and some ersatz coffee, what they call it, which was an imitation coffee. And I ate that, something to eat in a way. So then later on in the day they moved me, and they moved me with the top turret gunner. And he looked at me and he turned white. "How did you get out of that airplane?" "What do you mean? I bailed out." "How could you?" He said, "You had your chute in front and you were in back." "Oh," I says, "I took 2 chutes, but I said, the reason I didn't get to talk to anybody about it on the crew," I says, "I was so busy pre-flighting." "Oh," he says, I knew you had to stay in the ship." "Well," I says, "you should have come to the meeting and you'd have found out." So we stayed a few days there, and one night a German officer came in. He could speak a little English, but very little. He said he had English in school, but he didn't remember enough. So then they moved us. They put us on a big school bus, and they took us into Hanover, and they told us, you're going to go to the airport or the train station. And he said, I don't want anybody looking at any of the German people. You walk with your face against the wall. Because the people of Hanover, who did not exactly like the Germans, or the Germans did not like the American flyers because of the damage we'd done to Hanover. The Hanover and Bremen, the only two buildings left standing was the police station, and a guy that he really was an American citizen. Didn't know it until after the war because he was born in the United States. He says our house was the only house standing in the whole town. See, Bremen was a big submarine station is what it was. So they put us on trains and we moved, and every time there would be an airplane in the sky, we took that train, would go into a tunnel. We went down to, well, on board, in Europe, there's compartments on the train. They're little they're not like our trains. You have these compartments, see? So there were 6 of us and 1 guard in the apartment. And this one guy, POW, he had his face wrapped in what I always thought looked like crepe paper. It was pink. And he has his nose was burnt off, his ears were burnt off, and 1 hand was burnt, and 1 foot. He couldn't walk. People had to carry him. And he's been down a few days now, and I tell you, the odor that comes off of that dead flesh, you know, oh. Anyway, everybody in the compartment was talking how they got out of the airplane, and this fellow said, you see my condition? He says, I have a story that you won't believe, but I was in the upper turret, and we caught a direct hit from flak into the bomb bay, and the bombs exploded. He says, I'm falling through the air, all the debris around me, and there's a chest pack, so I grabbed it and clipped it on and opened it up. Okay. So we got down to near Frankfurt at Bad Hamburg for being interrogated, and the smell from this guy, he couldn't take it. Nobody wanted to carry him. So I went to my radio operator and I said, Dyke, we got to carry this guy. Oh, he says, I can't stand the smell. Dyke, I can't stand the smell either, but the Germans won't carry him. So we carried him about a mile till we got to this interrogation camp. And there was the last I saw of him. The Germans took him in there. He said that anybody needs medical attention, we're the first ones to go. So never heard from him since. But after the war, in Atlantic City, we spent 6 weeks there so we get reacquainted with civilization again. Everybody's talking about how they got out of the airplane, and this one guy says, you know, I got a story to tell. So he told about this guy. He says, say, did he have his ears burnt off and his nose burnt off and a foot and a hand? Yeah, he said. I says, I helped carry him when he was first shot down. So then several years ago, we went to a meeting in Dayton, Ohio, and that's where I met the pilots from the Castle Mission. In the bus, this one guy said, I was at Barth, that's Stalag Luft number 1. And he says, I got a story to tell that he can't believe. So he told the same story, and I said, does this guy have his ears burnt off, nose and hand and a foot? Yeah. He says, I heard the same story when he was first shot down. It was on TV that this was the second time that this is supposed to happen. I says, do you know the guy's name? He says, yeah, his name is Johnson. You know what happened to him? Yeah, he says, the Army patched him all up, good shape, and now he's a medical doctor. So, but anyway, they interrogated us, and because of my name is German, I got special treatment. I was thrown in solitary confinement for 10 days. Boy. And the rest of the crew, they went on ahead. Why did they pick on me? Well, anyway, solitary confinement is the worst thing you could possibly put on me. I don't know, maybe somebody else would enjoy it. The only entertainment I had was catching fleas. Ever try to catch a flea? You got to be real careful because he's gone. So I had about 24 of them I caught. I had them they had a table and a chair and a bunk. So I put them on the table, see, the dead ones. And then I called the guard and I pointed to him. He looked at him, you know. A little while later, a guy opened the door and stuck a sprayer and on the floor. I guess that was decontamination. So anyway, the guys tried to interrogate me, and I give them my name, rank, and serial number. But they knew more about me than I did. Apparently, they they had a good system of gathering newspapers from different places. Then I had another guy interrogate me. He was from St. Paul. Well, he happened to be in Germany in 1938, and he couldn't get back. He knew where Delano was, because he says you just take Highway 12 out through Wayzata and you'll come to Delano. But he was awfully interested in skiing. He says how many bones he broke skiing, you know, so he just talked skiing, but he says, you know, we're going to still win this war. He says, we have airplanes, they go so fast, he says, and they go whoosh, they're gone. Now, Germany did have jet airplanes, yes, they did. They had them in combat. I had an argument with a guy from the South Pacific. He says, the reason we won that war is we had the best equipment. I says, no, we won the war because we had the most equipment. I says, the Germans had jet planes in. We didn't have one in combat. The jet had the V1 rocket. They had the V2 rocket. I said, and their Tiger tank, I says, was the best. It had an 88 millimeter gun on it. And he says that 88 millimeter gun could be also used as an aircraft gun or an artillery gun. So they had good equipment. Their anti-aircraft guns was mostly manned at the end of the war by 14-year-olds, young girls as young as 14 years old are running those guns. And once if you strayed out and once you got out and they got on you, they could throw up everything they had on it in this, they call it flak. It's got a German name for it. Anyway, finally they let me go out of solitary confinement, and then they were going to go to a camp. So we went to Stalag Dulagluft, which is a transit camp. We were there for about 5 days, and then they put us in boxcars again, and then we're heading up for camp. We're going to go to Stalag Luft 4, which was located about halfway between Berlin and Danzig. It had been a camp that had been in use for less than 1 year. They were first moved in it in May of 1945 and evacuated in February 6, 1945. I should say in May of 1944 is when they opened it. It wasn't completely complete. There was one of the compounds was only about 75% complete. That's where we're heading for. So we get in, and we get sidetracked all the time, and we're in Berlin, and we're sitting there. There was a bullet hole in the side of the boxcar, so I could put my eye to it and look up, and what I saw was little kids, maybe 6 or 7 years old, in the wintertime, no gloves, picking up the debris and bricks. Oh my gosh. That's a sight I'll never forget. Finally, we get to camp, to Gross Tischau was the train station. There we were marched into camp, where we were strip searched. I mean, strip search. They took your clothes, every inch of it they examined, to make sure you didn't have any contraband, and looked you over, head to toe, make sure you didn't steal something in it. So then we went into camp, and there we get into the camp and put into a room. There were, I think, 23 fellas already in this room, about 3/4 the size of this room. No, I wouldn't even do that. About half, I'd say. The bunks were stacked 3 high, and you got, as your seniority worked its way up, you got to get the bunks. So I'm a newcomer, so I get to sleep on the floor. We sat them sleep on the table, and then they had stools. They'd sleep on the stools. For a mattress, we had a mattress filled with shredded paper. That was it. And so that was the sleeping quarters that I came into. And first of all, everybody in the room wants to know when you were last. Well, I said I had a good Thanksgiving dinner, and oh my, how everybody moaned and groaned about that, you know, because they didn't have it. Now, here's the routine in camp. First in the morning, they're called out for roll call. They line you up, and you got to stand all nice in rows, and they count you. And if the count isn't right, you stay there until they find out and get the count right. And this is in the wintertime. It's kind of cool, you know. Anyway, then you're let to go back in the barracks. But for breakfast, we all got a cup of hot water. That was the breakfast. If we had something to eat, we could use it. We got half a loaf of bread a week, which was dark bread made of sawdust. The formula was in one of the POW magazines, out of the recipe, I should say. And the bottom of it was dated 1937. They said down at Munich there were whole warehouses full of this kind of bread. I mean, it stuck to your ribs, I guess. But anyway, then come for the noon meal. We generally had, like, to me it was like boiled dried alfalfa. And of course they had few critters in there too, so you got a little extra protein, see? Now, I tried and I tried, but I just couldn't eat it. And then the supper meal, or the dinner meal, whatever you want to call it, generally consisted of potatoes, and they would take the beef from Argentina. It was the, I can't think of it. We have it on St. Patrick's Day. Corned beef from Argentina. Well, they would take this out of the Red Cross parcels, and they'd throw some of that in, so there was a little meat in there, and potatoes. A real treat for eating was to have barley soup. It was very thick. It was thick like oatmeal, and they took pearl barley, which we have in soups, and that's what we had. And we would get maybe about 6 ounces of sugar a week, and you put a little sugar to it and some powdered milk from the Red Cross parcel. It was very tolerable. That was the best thing that we'd get. And so we were getting a Red Cross parcel a week, which is enough in camp to keep you alive. There were cigarettes, there was Clem, powdered milk, there was a can of margarine in there, and a can of crackers in there, like graham crackers, and a D-bar. That was the big thing, was the D-bar, which was a chocolate bar, and it's supposed to have a lot of extras they put in it for vitamins and stuff. But when you got that, you could survive on that, is what you could. So now the other routine is the German guards had free run of the barracks 24 hours a day. You never know when they'd come in. But there was a standing rule that whenever someone spotted a guard in, they would yell out, "Goons up," G-O-O-N, goons up. Now, if you don't know what a goon is, look it up in the library dictionary, and it'll tell you what a goon is. G-O-O-N. So one of the guards grabbed one of the guys that said, "Goons up," and took him to the commandant, and he says, "Was ist das Goon up?" What is this goon up? Oh, the guy said, "German officer or non-commissioned officer." And they let him go. So anyway, the camp, we had a library, we had a band, and had all kinds of musical instruments, and they had a meeting hall. They put on lectures by the prisoners, and you name it, they had put on beautiful lectures. I just couldn't imagine how much talent there was, and the guys that could artists. They would draw nice pictures of girls on the wall, you know, and beautiful job they could do on this. And then the earlier prisoners got a kind of a diary book, which was a beautiful book, and they would draw pictures in there. So, church, we had a Catholic priest, English, that came in and said Mass on Sunday to us. And he was captured at Dunkirk. He stayed back with the troops, and he was captured at Dunkirk. And they had a Presbyterian, English, the English church. They had one of their ministers. So they had two kinds of services there. And then at Christmas, the guys put a wonderful show on of with the talent they had, and the band, and I mean, there was all kinds of things to keep you more busy, see. But the camp was completely surrounded with barbed wire, and 10 feet in from the barbed wire was a warning wire. It was just a straight, non-barbed wire, but do not cross or touch that wire, because they had watchtowers, and with machine guns in, they said, "We have the right to shoot you if you go there." So in the summertime, I see if you played ball, if it ran under the warning wire, you left it there. So this is a kind of a routine that went on all the time. And of course, in the afternoon again, there was